Okay, folks, so we're going to move on to the final part of this half of the unit, okay? Because this unit used to be in two halves, and then for this year, they've turned it into one big unit. So this would be halfway in unit 3, okay? So what I think we'll do is then do a bit of revision, perhaps do a little progress test at home, something like that, just to check that we have been engaging with the home learning and that we are on top of things. Okay, so this will be the final topic we do probably until the week after next. We won't do anything new, I think, for a couple of weeks now. Okay, so it's called motives for spending, saving, and borrowing. We've kind of touched on it in the past when we looked at people's spending habits over time, and this kind of goes on further into it in a bit more detail. Okay, so start your activity today. If your pocket money or income increased by $200 a week, what would you spend it on? Would you choose to save any of it? So have a think, put down a few notes. What do you reckon? Okay, so the next thing is using you borrow. What? Using you borrow. You borrow 100,000 from a bank with an interest rate of 2.5% per annum per year for 10 years. How much do you pay back a month? How much would you pay back over the lifetime of the loan? Okay, we could work that out, but what's the point? We're going to use this calculator here. So we're going to borrow $100,000, 10 years, and we get 2% interest. So we'd be looking at $93 a month. We would pay, and the interest being paid would be $592.91, okay, if we were to get this. So how much you pay back for the lifetime of the loan? What if interest were more like 4% for 10 years and you borrowed the same amount of money? How much would you pay back then? Would this affect your willingness to take out a loan? So let's go on with the main lesson there. So two definitions. So we're talking about motives of spending, saving, and borrowing. So a couple of definitions. We have got wealth. Okay, so wealth is just the value of all the assets owned by a person. So savings, property, stocks, anything with a tangible value. Okay, that would be a person's wealth. So it's not to do with your income. Your wealth is static. Okay, it's what you actually hold that has value. Okay, whereas your income is the money that you're earning. Okay, so that's your income. But your disposable income, which is a term we'll use more and more, is the amount that you have left after you've paid tax. Okay, so it's the cash that you've got left every month after your tax has been deducted. Okay, that's your actual disposable income that you can spend on anything you like. Okay, and the relationship between disposable income and consumption often looks a bit like this. So it's a bit out of date, it's about 10 years out of date, but you can see the trend. So the gap between the red line, disposable income, and the green line, consumption, the gap between that represents savings. Okay, so you can see the most amount of savings went on in the 80s, and it increased a lot from the 60s, and now there is still some savings, but less than in previous times. Okay, so that would be the relationship between disposable income and consumption. Okay. So where can people get income from? Well, it can be active income, which means that they generate from working. Okay, so if you go to work, that is active income in recompense for your day's work. Okay, you could do portfolio income, so that would be capital gains from selling assets. So if you owned a house and sold it, that would be portfolio income. If you bought stocks, they appreciated in value and then you sold them, that would be portfolio income. Or you could have passive income from your portfolio. Okay, so this is generated. So if you own a house and you earn rent on that house, that's passive income. If you put money in the bank and gain interest, that's passive income. Dividends is your share of profits. If you own shares in a company, that would be passive income. Okay, so what affects consumption and spending levels. Well, obviously disposable income. The more disposable income you have, which we'll have a look at in a minute, the more likely you are to save. Maybe social attitudes towards saving. Certain attitudes. So millennials are apparently more likely to save and be worried about the future. Okay, so maybe the social attitude and what's going on in the world might affect people's attitude to consumption and spending. People working fewer hours and spending more time and engaged in leisure activities. So yeah, people might be more likely to spend and save less if you're working fewer hours. Couples marrying later and more living apart. That's going to affect your spending. Technology and creating new products, changing the interest rate, which as we've just proven in the start of the cost of borrowing, and consumer confidence. When people are confident, people are much more likely to spend. There is lots of reasons to not be confident at the minute because of economic downturn, primarily fueled by the virus. Then people are less likely to spend and more likely to be saving for a rainy day because of the uncertainty that we face. So what do we mean by savings? Well, saving is any part of income that's not spent. So as we discussed on this graph, the difference between the red and the green is saving. So the part of disposable income that's not spent or deferred consumption or delayed consumption is saving. Okay, so who saves the most? So you can see we've got disposable income in blue, we've got consumption in orange, so there we've got saving in green. And then these are 5 quintiles of income. So the first quintile are the poorest people, the third quintile would be the average people, and the 5th quintile would be the high earning people. Okay, so as you can see, the more you spend, the more you earn, so up to 180,000 US dollars a year, very respectable income, high income, then you're going to spend obviously more than that, but you're going to spend more than the other quintiles, but you've still got money left to save. You've still got $65,000, nearly $70,000 to save. Okay, so basically the higher income you are, the more consumption you can do and the more that you can save. Okay, and you can see this trend, the trend throughout. So we've got the greens slowly going up, blue goes up, and then the orange varies depending on income. Okay, so you can see the second poorest quintile spend every penny they earn, tiny little bit of savings, and then the third quintile, the average person, spends most of their income and saves a little. Okay, so we can talk about that we've just discussed. Why do people save money? Have a think. How does saving change over a person's life? Think back to that graph in the workbook that you've got already. Scroll up and have a look. How does savings change over a person's lifetime? And what affects saving? Well, obviously income. We've just shown that on the graph. Again, confidence in the economy and future prospects. If people are confident, they're more likely to go out and spend. If they're concerned about the future, they're much more likely to save. Interest rates, so the higher the interest rate the bank is giving you, because remember, interest rates is the cost of borrowing and the return on saving. So the bigger return you would get on savings, the more likely you are to save. And again, cultural attitudes towards saving. Asian cultures typically have a more cautious and save more money historically, whereas Western countries like the UK and America have a much more consumption-based economy and save a lot less in general, okay? So have a read through this little case study on Japan, and according to the extract, why are saving levels high in Japan? Okay, so you can see that people are worried about losing their jobs, so they're likely to save, so they're saving because they're worried about that. They also have a culture of saving and a tradition of saving, and even though interest rates are very, very low, people are still not going out and spending. And Japan has had a really tough time in the 90s and 2000s where no matter how low the interest rate got, and no matter how much the government encouraged consumption and spending, Japanese people just wouldn't do it. They were worried about their pension, they were worried about supporting their parents, they were worried about losing their jobs, and there was this culture and attitude towards high levels of saving, and then the country couldn't spend their way out of their financial economic difficulties. Okay? So, final bit, borrowing. So, borrowing is the temporary acquisition, so temporarily getting hold of money with the intent to repay the amount borrowed. A fee or interest rate is usually paid. So let's have a look at this debt here. So this is the average US household, so in specific categories. So the average US household has $16,000 of debt on credit cards, $30,000 of auto loans, so car loans, $50,000 US dollars of student loans, and $182,000 of debt in mortgages to buy properties. Mortgage is just a loan to buy a property if you don't know. So, final couple of questions then, or final question rather, why do people borrow money? Have a think. Why would people need to borrow money? Well, obviously that could be to fund large purchases like going to college, buying a car, buying a house. Maybe it's because they're low income. Maybe it's because there's a special event coming up, or maybe that they are living beyond their means and not able to pay for the lifestyle that they want to have. That's a really common problem. So, final list then. What affects borrowing levels? Income and wealth levels. Confidence in the economy and future prospects. Obviously the interest rate, as we showed all the way back at the top, the higher the interest rate, the more interest you have to pay and the more expensive borrowing is. Cultural attitudes towards borrowing. Some cultures are very risk averse. Again, traditionally Asian countries aren't big borrowers, whereas Western countries are much bigger borrowers. State provision of healthcare and education, so maybe people have to take out loans for healthcare and education if it's not provided by the government, and house prices. If house prices are high, you're going to need to borrow to cover that. Okay, so as I said at the start of the video, that's the end of one half of Unit 3. So it starts at money and banking and goes through to here. So we'll do some revision topics and classes next week, and then maybe have a short progress test at the end of next week in about 7 days' time. Okay? Right, I'll be in touch. Bye-bye.